All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're joining us today for this special conversation. My name is Alisa Kerr, and I am the Partnership Liaison for the National Institute for Direct Instruction. And today we are celebrating a remarkable milestone this year, the 40th anniversary of the publication of Expressive Writing. Since its first publication, Expressive Writing has empowered thousands of learners across the US and beyond, strengthening students' writing skills, building confidence through structured, purposeful instruction. And to honor this incredible anniversary, I have the pleasure and privilege of speaking with one of the brilliant minds behind the program today, Jerry Silbert. Jerry is a co-author of Expressive Writing. Jerry, thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm excited to reflect on the journey of expressive writing, hear your insights, and celebrate the lasting impact that the program has had over the last 4 decades. So let's dive in. Jerry, can you just start by telling us about yourself and your association with direct instruction?
All righty. I began my contact with direct instruction in 1968. I was trying to add on my fingers how many years ago that was, but I said, I'm not going to bother. And I was in a program that was designed by the federal government to take people who had graduated from college already and been out in the world, but who decided to be teachers. And I had gone back to school through that program. And I felt I was learning nothing. I was working with low-income kids, and I really had no idea what to do. And I heard about this program called DISTAR, Direct Instruction System for Teaching Arithmetic and Reading. And I went to observe it, and I said, this is the real thing. And I want to learn, if I'm going to be in education, I want to learn from the people who are creating materials like that. So I was at the University of Minnesota. The program ended. I got on a train and came out to Oregon, where the program was being constructed, where the team was being constructed. I didn't even know where Oregon was, but I was young and adventurous. And that I knocked on the door of the office, and for the next 50 years have worked with those people. After a while in Eugene, I was in Eugene, Oregon, I became a teacher. And as I taught the program, then as I was teaching, I taught virtually all the programs as they were being written. I was like one of the tryouts, and it was just a great privilege. So I taught for a long time. I got to know Siegfried Engelmann, the senior author, Doug Conine, another senior author, and I worked with them and kind of assisted them as, they were two brilliant people, and I had accounting as my previous degree and was really pretty well organized. So my job, and also I worked with kids. So I became a co-author with them on a lot of the programs, and it was really just a wonderful privilege.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Thank you for
Yes.
sharing that. So, what inspired the creation of expressive writing? It sounds like you got to experience other programs.
Yes. I always was interested in working with low-income kids, and that was my real focus. And that's why I came out to Oregon and got involved. Okay. Uh, We first started working on the expressive writing program in 1980 when a principal of a low-income school asked me to read over the writings of her primary grade students and to talk with her teachers about the problems they were having. I first looked at the papers students in a third grade classroom had written about what they had done during the summer. This is really a pretty complicated task. Students are expected to decide what activities to include in their passage, determine how to describe their activities, determine how to sequence their writing, construct and punctuate sentences, and the list goes on of the skills you really need to know. I remember that as a kid too. I hated it. Reading over the papers, it was clear that many of the kids had little understanding of basic writing skills. There were loads of run-on sentences and sentence fragments that did not include a subject and a predicate. The students were inconsistent with capitalization and punctuation. It almost seemed that the kids put in capitals and periods, commas, quotation marks at random. Hey, the teacher says I got to put them in. Okay, I'll put them in. I I don't know why, but here they are. There are also lots of problems with clarity. Pronouns were often used before a person or thing was identified. Important details were left out. Verb tense agreement and sequencing were inconsistent. Kids would write some sentences that began in the past tense, then switched over to the present tense. Later in the day, I visited fourth and fifth grade classrooms and found about half the kids were making the same kind of errors that the third graders had made. Several years later, one of the sad things, I visited Title I rooms in middle schools and even in some high schools and found loads of kids making the same kinds of errors. Okay. When I met with the teachers, they expressed their frustration with the tools they were given to teach writing. Uh, they were using a curriculum that included lots of tasks for which the students did not have the needed prerequisites. There were some exercises to teach foundational prerequisite skills, but the skill was only presented for a day or two, and few kids were able to master what was being taught. The teachers told me that many students were completely confused about what a sentence was. I remember when I was a kid, I was really confused about what constituted sentences. I remember in high school, a teacher telling me that a sentence expressed an idea. I had no idea what that meant and how that could help me. At the schools I was visiting, the principals required that all student work be marked and returned to the students. One teacher described a dilemma that really disturbed him. The kids made so many errors, if he corrected them all, it would seem the kids had written their papers in red ink. To say the least, this would be discouraging, for the kids. The other option was to correct only some errors and write encouraging statements, giving the students the misleading impression that their writing was acceptable. Okay. So after this experience, I went to visit Zig Engelman, formerly known as Siegfried Engelman, at the Engelman Becker Corporation. Zig was the senior author of all DI programs. Unlike the way most publishers, this is really an important piece now. Unlike the way most publishers hire a group of authors and editors to put together a program, Zig wrote virtually every word of every program with his name on it. Reading Mastery, Language for Learning, Language for Thinking, This Star Math, Corrective Reading. One of our consultants amazingly estimated that over 10 million kids have used programs that Zig wrote. Okay. Zig had been thinking about constructing a program to teach writing for a while, but was having difficulty with SRA, the publisher of the DI programs. The publisher wanted him to construct a program that would include all the language skills specified in the state standards. The problem was, doing this, there were so many skills to be taught that there would not be adequate time to focus and to teach to mastery the requisite writing skills. The standards at that time were, the best way to describe them, they were a mile long and an inch thick. There were so many standards to do that, many of which were kind of ridiculous. Okay. Fortunately, at this time, there was a publisher in Oregon, CC Publishing, who jumped at the opportunity to publish a program that focused on beginning writing skills. Zig and CC Publishing contracted to construct so that Zig could construct a narrative reading program. Several years later, seeing the interest in the program, SRA bought it from CC Publishing.
Wow.
And it's gone through a whole bunch of other steps, which I'll talk about as we go on. Quite to my surprise, Zig asked me to be a co-author on the program. I had gotten to know Zig because I had been trying out new DI programs since 1975. Unlike the process in creating most published programs, the idea of trying out a program with kids as you are writing the program and making revisions when kids had difficulty was an integral part of all DI programs. So by the time a DI program got out there, it had been field tested, revised, and revised again. And the ZIG's objective was programs don't go out in the world until I know they really work with the kids. Okay.
Absolutely.
I was teaching a third grade class at Whitaker Elementary School in Eugene, Oregon, a very low income school. Zig thought these kids would be a good place, a good group to try out the program. In order to place in the program, children would only have to read at a beginning or middle second grade level, be able to copy words at a regular speed, and be able to repeat simple oral sentences. My kids all met this criteria. It was really a privilege to work with Zig, and let me see if I can explain why. Uh, when I was trying out the expressive writing program, every day after school, I would go to Zig's office and tell him how the kids performed on the day's lesson. Zig was not the most patient man in the world. When he heard exercises had not been affected, he wanted to work immediately on determining what the problem was with what he had written so that he could revise lessons for the next day. It didn't take me too long to figure out that I needed to be very specific in reporting how the kids performed. I learned that you never made a general statement like, the kids had trouble on an exercise. That was not what he wanted to hear because he didn't know what to do. Didn't give him the information. He wanted you to tell him exactly what kind of errors the kids had made and how many kids had made the errors. And after a while, were these kids who typically had trouble or typically didn't have trouble? Okay. Once we started on writing lessons for the expressive writing program, my routine was to teach during the day, including presenting the draft lessons Zig had written, then come to the office and sit next to Zig, and as he went over the feedback from me and the feedback from several other teachers. He always wanted to have several tryout groups going to ensure the feedback he was receiving reflected the script he had wrote and the teachers were following the script. If a teacher was not following the script, the feedback would be useless. Teachers had to discipline themselves and not try to modify lessons, but give feedback and rely on Zig to fix the problems. Zig also wanted to try out the program with a variety of skill levels. But it was always the lowest kids who were our best teachers, the lowest kids. When you worked with higher kids, they may have known a whole bunch of stuff already. But when you worked with the lower kids, they told you what all the prerequisite skills that need to be taught. My responsibility as a co-author was to help organize what Zig had written so he could readily locate his drafts of earlier exercises and then to read as he typed to ensure that what he was writing was consistent with what he had presented earlier in the program and indicate to him when I thought there was a problem. That was not a pleasure. Okay. I also helped organize the materials, preparing what he had written for our secretaries and for the artists who worked for us.
Okay.
Working with the artists was very challenging, and I spent a lot of time doing that. The criteria for the art had to match exactly what the script said. I would write instructions for the artists. The artist would do a pencil version. We would try out the exercises with the penciled art and make revisions when needed. It was a privilege to work with Zig. I worked with him not only on expressive writing, but some other ones. It was a privilege to be there as he redid exercises and lessons until they were producing success for all the kids. I tell people, just like James Brown was the hardest working man in show business, Zig Engelman was the hardest working author in the instructional program world.
While you were developing and going through this process, what did anything surprise you that you weren't expecting?
It was really interesting how he was going about constructing the program. You know, as a third grade teacher, I had messed around with trying to teach writing and really nothing had worked. So, so as he started putting together the program, it was very interesting. As I watched Zig put the program together, I could see he was incorporating design principles common to all DI programs. All skills that the student needs for an advanced task are thoroughly taught before the students need to utilize the skills in the advanced tasks. In so many commercial programs, really hard things come up and the kids haven't been taught the prerequisites.
Right.
DI programs, they are taught the prerequisites. New information is introduced in manageable chunks and adequate practice is provided for students to master each subskill. And this is where working with lower performing kids come in. They tell you how much they can learn at one time. They tell you if you're doing too much. When you're working with kids who come into school with more of an academic background, they may get things right, not because your program is so good, but because they know they have a lot of this knowledge already.
Yeah.
And a track design is utilized. A track is an ongoing series of exercises on a particular skill or topic. Within each track, exercises gradually increase in difficulty. Uh, Tracks start with relatively easy tasks and move to more difficult ones. A track design enables lessons to be constructed that are not overwhelming for students. There may just be one task that is new, while other tasks provide review. So that he can construct lessons that are manageable for the teachers, not frustrating for the kids. Eventually, the publisher wanted to incorporate the writing into language arts programs. They wanted to construct a language arts program.
Yeah.
So what was taught in expressive writing was used in a program called reasoning and writing. There were 5 levels of this, and it focused on not all the state skills, but a lot of the state skills. So we took the expressive and put it into reasoning and writing. Then several years later, SRA said, oh, we're going to make a language arts program, a DI language arts program. Then what we had done for reasoning and writing was put into language for learning. And each time
Oh,
we'd make little revisions. We make revisions on this. And then
okay.
it was taught, it was called reading mastery signatures. Then 5 or 10 years later, there was reading mastery transformations. And the biggest change that recently we made is where before we started really systematically teaching in third grade, now we find we can do it in second grade as more and more teaching is done of reading in kindergarten. So
Yeah,
it's,
that makes
it's real,
sense.
now not with all kids, but just,
Right.
kids who can meet our criteria. In 2003, SRA McGraw-Hill agreed to support revision of Expressive Writing 1 and the construction of a new level, Expressive Writing 2. The major revision we made on Expressive Writing 1 were revising and updating the art and putting a lot more emphasis on how teachers structured and prompted writing exercises. We found that prompting and modeling oral responses before we asked students to write independently was very valuable, especially for the children with low language skills. The goal was to do sufficient oral preparation so the kids would be successful when writing their passages. And this took a lot of teacher skill. The trick was to do something over and over again,
Hmm.
not making it feel like a drag. It's like,
Right.
oh man, you guys are doing great. This stuff is so hard. I can't believe how good you guys are doing. Let me say those 4 sentences. Anybody think they can say those 4 sentences about what happened? Boom. Boom. Okay, I'll say a sentence, then you guys say the next sentence, and making it fun. You
Right.
can't script all of that, but that we had suggestions in the teacher's guide about how to keep those activities going. And,
Right.
and so when the kids wrote, they were successful. And our big test, if we were doing a good job, or a big test for him, and that became a we after a while. uh, Corrections are specified for common errors that students are likely to make. If the program is well constructed, any errors kids make should be able to be corrected by referring to tasks that students have already been taught earlier in the program. If it's not clear for a teacher how to correct and affirm the students, that's a message to the authors that the presentation needs to be revised. I'd always be asking, if the kids do this, what should the teacher do? If the kids do this, what should the teacher do? So
The programs are implemented with fidelity.
yeah,
What kind of successes have you seen? And is there any specific case studies or schools that did it really well that stand out to you?
yeah. I got to visit a lot of, over the years, I taught for 15 years, and then I started working with community groups that that advocated for low and low middle income families. And one of their main objectives was to improve instruction for the kids. So I eventually got to visit schools that were doing very well. And one of the things we noticed in the writing program was how well, when the program was used in third grade, and when it was used, how well the kids wrote in the upper grades. You know,
Mhm.
you could really see dramatic differences
Yeah.
in their writing. Constructing the expressive writing program called for the use of some instructional features that were unique. The challenge was how to construct the program so that it would be manageable for both teachers and groups of students. When kids write, if you just give them a writing assignment, kids will write, everybody will write about different things. So how do you provide corrections? How do you manage it? How do you make it a good instructional tool, for
Mhm.
providing feedback for teaching and providing for kids? So Zig figured out some things that really are unique. Okay. Well, first, he didn't use grammatical terms. Expressive writing purposely avoids reference to the terms subject, predicate, noun, verb, pronoun, adjective. The reason for not using these terms is that many older students have been introduced to these words and are completely confused and intimidated by their usage. Teaching effective writing doesn't really initially require knowledge of these terms. I remember when I was a teacher, I had some pretty tough little kids, and if they thought they were going to have trouble with something, they would start acting out. So, I was pretty good at showing them, you're going to be successful in this task. Don't worry. We're going to go
Yeah.
through this together. Okay. Okay. The, the biggest, the probably, I'll mention a couple of the major factors that made the program successful. First was the use of pictures. Unlike writing programs that require students to, from the very beginning, describe an experience, or what did you do this summer? Or make up an imaginative narrative. Constructing expressive writing uses carefully designed picture sequences as the vehicles for teaching writing. Picture gives the teacher and the students a common reference. When the teacher calls on a student, all students can judge the response, and the group can learn from the correction to individuals. Using pictures, you can control the vocabulary students need to use in their writing. Paragraph writing exercises have vocabulary boxes that students may refer to when constructing their sentences. The vocabulary box serves as a prompt that does not have to be. So we tell the kids, you don't have to use these words, but if you need to, you can. And I remember, like when I was teaching writing before, every 2 seconds, how do you spell this word? How do you do this word? How do you do this? And it would be nice when I was teaching. Once I started using expressive writing, it was just calm. And
Yeah,
we knew the words the kids would have trouble with, and we put them in the box to be a prompt. And again, the
right.
higher performing kids didn't need it, but the lower performing kids did. So we could keep the group together and keep them successful. Okay.
Yeah,
Another feature that Zick put into the program was reporting. The concept of reporting is used throughout the program. It's introduced from the very first lessons. The rule for reporting is that when you report, you tell what the picture shows. You go ahead. So early exercises require the students to observe pictures carefully, to identify sentences that report, they tell what the picture shows, and do not report because they're inaccurate, or they tell how a person feels, or what a person wants. The kids really liked these exercises because they could be successful. And they said, hey, man, this is hard stuff. You got to look carefully. Like we had I remember one, they showed some kids at a swimming pool and they said, the boy is wearing a striped bathing suit. They said, no, he's not. He's wearing a checkered bathing suit. And they were so proud of themselves being able to determine what reported and what didn't
yeah,
report. But using reported let us control the exercises so everybody would be writing on the same common reference.
right,
So then
right.
you were teaching a group. Okay. Later in the program, making inferences is introduced in a task in which students see a sequence of pictures and use the evidence in the pictures to determine what must have happened between the pictures. To keep instruction simple, the word inference is not used. Instructional wording. We just said, what must have happened between the pictures? Look, okay, look at the cowboy here. He's on top of the horse. Look at the cowboy here. He's sitting in the mud. What do you think must have happened? Look at the cowboy's hat. And, so we could really make the kids feel confident about themselves. Another part was rules about sentences. Hey, boy, we did a lot. There was a lot in these programs. Rules for sentences. Students learned a rule for sentences. And the rule was a sentence has two parts. The first part names somebody or something. The next part tells more about that person or thing, such as what the person or thing did or what the person or thing was doing. In Expressive Writing 1, most of the sentences the students wrote told about what somebody or something did. And it was really interesting to see Ziggy create the instances to be used in formats to teach about what a sentence was, because you had to be careful to make sure the sentences were of different lengths. Like, you could have a sentence, the boy and his sister walked down the crooked path next to the river. That's a sentence, but she Alice walked. That's a sentence. So the teaching showed the kids the whole range of examples that could be used in creating sentences. Here are some advantages for teaching students to write basic sentences. Okay, when students write basic sentences, punctuation and capitalization requirements are minimized. Most of the sentences require only a capital and a period, and a period at the end, because the students are mechanically easy. Because the sentences are mechanically easy, and the students are able to concentrate on the content of the sentences. The teachers can more readily correct punctuation errors by prompting students to identify the part that names and the part that tells when. And the basic sentence that names and tells and here's something really interesting. The basic sentences that name and tell what a person or thing did require writing in the active voice rather than in the passive voice. Writing in the active voice is easier for students, and students will be less likely to get stuck and not know what to write next. Using the active voice also makes it more likely that the writing will be clear. A university professor, university English professor, once visited an expressive writing classroom and was amazed at the high percentage of sentences students wrote in the active class. He said, I wish I could get my college students to do that. Okay. Learning about basic sentences establishes a foundation that leads naturally to writing more complex sentences. Expressive writing shows the students how to transform sentences. For instance, the sentence, John ran home after the game ended, can be transformed into the sentence, after the game ended, John ran home. The program teaches that any changes to the basic sentence requires changes in punctuation. If a part that tells when has been moved to the beginning of a sentence, a comma is used to show that the sentence does not begin with the part that names. Kids love those exercises because they felt so smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I saw throughout the program, when the program is well implemented, is kids felt smart. I remember when I was a kid, I hated writing exercises, and I do anything to avoid them because they kind of made me feel stupid. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I felt really good. I felt really good visiting classrooms in which expressive writing is used and seeing the kids being successful.
Absolutely. That must have been really rewarding.
Like, okay. Then another thing Zig did, he made a requirement that all writing would be in the past tense. Okay. Many kids have trouble with being consistent in the tenses they use in their writing. In the expressive writing program, the teacher directs the students to write in the past tense, telling about what happened, not what is happening or happens. Again, the term past tense is not used to keep communication clear. The initial writing exercises require students to write in the simple past tense. Before the students write sentences, the program teaches how to create words that will tell what happened by adding the suffix ed to present tense verbs, spill, spilled, and
Mhm.
introduces the more common irregular past time verbs, run, ran. When there is an irregular past tense word to be written, that word will appear in the vocabulary box. Okay.
Nice.
Okay. And one more major feature. Okay, editing. Okay. Most teachers will tell you, my my kids need to rewrite their passages, need to reread their passages and make changes, but they hate doing it. Okay. So how does Zig approach this? Okay. Uh, Editing began early in expressive writing and continued throughout the program. The initial editing exercises were pretty simple. Students were likely to find themselves being successful as they examined their work for capitals and periods, reporting, and telling what a person or thing did. Okay. Editing is incorporated into passage writing exercises through the use of checkboxes. After writing a paragraph, students will check their papers for 3 or 4 criteria. For instance, in early exercises in which students are to copy a sentence that tells the main thing a girl did, like Julia skated in the park, the students are to write a paragraph copying the main sentence and writing 2 more sentences that tell what the person did. The checks for the exercise are: check 1, does each sentence begin with a capital, end with a period? Check 2, does each sentence tell what the person did? Check 3, does each sentence report on what the picture shows? Check 4, does each sentence you made up begin with she? So, yeah. The teacher observes the children carefully as they go through their editing and prompts when there is a problem, establishing editing as a positive experience early is the trick. The kids say, "Oh, this editing, this rereading stuff is not so bad, and it helps me get stuff right." New content is introduced throughout the program with a consistent four-step procedure. Students first learn a particular skill over a period of 3 to 5 lessons, practicing the skill in verbal and workbook exercises. For example, the use of pronouns, he, she, and it. Jane went to the park. She went to the park. James went to the park. He went to the park. The dog ran behind them. It ran behind them. The kids learn how to use pronouns, and then students edit passages in their workbook that contain errors involving the new skill. Then it goes, students complete writing assignments that integrate the newly taught skill. Students edit their own writing for the use of the newly taught skill, as well as other skills introduced earlier in the program. As students move on in the program, everything that has been taught earlier can be integrated into writing. The program is designed to be efficient. On completing Expressive Writing 1, students will have mastered really the most important, but not the most obvious writing skills. Okay, they really will be accomplished in telling what happened, in creating complete sentences, reporting on what picture shows, and drawing inferences. Okay, but they have to do a lot more for teachers in the upper grades to be happy. Expressive Writing 2 focused on a number of elements that could prepare students for assignments they would encounter in their grade level classes. There were 4 major parts: quotations, expansion of sentence types, clarity, and paragraphing. Okay, so let me briefly go over that. Okay, work on quotations starts early in Expressive Writing 2. Students progress through a sequence of learning and applying the quotation rules when writing individual sentences. So first they write individual sentences. The first sentence are pretty easy. We do that for quite a while. We have them edit sentences. Then the pictures include the little comic book circles, including what people said, and they have to incorporate the writing into their passages, and then edit for the quotes. Okay, teachers love when kids use quotes. You show kids, oh, look at that, they got quotes. Wow. Another major thing was the expansion of the sentence types. In Expressive Writing 1, we just keep it pretty much to name something, tell what it did. Name something, tell what it did. And the kids go off of that a little bit, but we're not teaching other types. But in level 2, we start teaching those other types. Sentences that begin with a part that tells when or where. Sentences that begin by telling if, although, or unless. Sentences that include a series of names or actions. The boy, the girl, and his sister bought tickets for the show. Okay, and compound sentences with but. And for each kind of sentence type, we give them a reason why the punctuation requirements exist. Sentences that begin with a part of when or where, we're not beginning with the part that names, so we're putting in the comma to let you know that. If, although, and unless, same thing. They're not, if the sentence begins with if, though, or unless, it's not naming the part that begins. Sentence that includes a series of names or actions. John went to the store and saw his friend and came home late. So, oh, we don't want all those ands. Let's take out one of the ands and let's put in, and when we take out an and, we got to put a comma in place. John, comma, blah, blah, blah. Clarity. Now, clarity, it gets to be the real thing in writing. There are two basic types of clarity taught in expressive writing too. These can make a great deal of difference in how well students communicate what happened. One deals with the usage of pronouns, the other with important details. The first type, pronoun clarity, uh, occurs when a student uses a pronoun. It is not clear who or what the pronoun is referring to. For example, in these two sentences, James and Myron ran home. He got home first. We don't know who got home first. The program teaches students to avoid this kind of error by presenting the rules. If there are two men named in a sentence, you can't begin your next sentence with the word he. Likewise, if there are two women named in a sentence, you can't begin the next sentence with she. A series of tasks are presented in which students need to indicate if they can use he or she and use the name of, or use the name of one of the persons mentioned in the first sentence. Now, this task is kind of nice especially for the lower language kids
Yes.
who haven't gotten much feedback about being clear. Now,
Yes.
the other major pronoun problem is when a student uses a pronoun before a person or thing has been named. A lot of times, kids, especially the low language kids,
Mhm.
they they know they're telling a story, and they don't think about, am I communicating clearly?
Right.
So they'll use a he or a she, and the and the there's a whole bunch of really simple exercises on that. And once the kids, oh, I got it, and then we had them edit for it. There's a whole bunch of times where they edit for it. So each step is a little step, and each step makes kids feel they're smart. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the most serious clarity problem is leaving out important details. And again, this is a real language, a language issue. Beginning early in the program, there will be exercises in which students are shown a passage that tells what happened in a series of pictures. A blank line appears where an important detail is left out, and students are prompted to use details in the passage and pictures to determine what sentence is missing. So that's pretty simple, but yeah, it works. Students will see, but it's not enough. For later students will see a sequence of pictures in which they will need to create a number of sentences, okay, to tell what must have happened between the pictures. The teacher prompts the students to say sentences that tell all the important things that happened. You told me the cowboy fell off the horse. Can you tell me more? Say a sentence that tells where the cowboy landed. Say a sentence that tells what the horse did after the cowboy fell. Uh, Say a sentence about what the little boy who was watching did. Okay. The teacher has kids say sentences. Uh, she'll the teaching skill is, if the kids don't say it quite right, the teacher will say it correctly without telling the kids they were wrong, and then have the individual and the group repeat the sentences. So the trick is how to give feedback, how to keep the lesson, how to be teaching, and how to get the kids real involved. If you don't smile a lot when you teach expressive writing, you might have trouble.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
Actually,
really, yes.
can I ask a question about that? So for expressive writing, how important is teacher training?
Oh, very important. Very, very, very important. Teachers really they want to know how when you present the lesson, how do I correct these mistakes? You want to have in your mind, okay, here's how I present, and we want to have the basics of presenting of DI lessons with unison responses and good clear signals and good pacing and immediate corrections. But there's much more to it in teaching expressive writing because you're going to respond to a wide variety of student responses. And and you want to have really at your fingertips how you can go back to what you taught earlier, how you can prompt the kids to be successful. So the training and the practice ahead of time is really very important.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things when teachers can observe each other too, because again, the passage writing is probably the most complex task for teachers in presenting. And we have some basic rules, but the the big rule is do enough practice, model for the kids, have them say it over again, do it orally. And then when they do start writing, walk around and observe their writing. Be there so if kids make errors, you can quickly correct them, but you don't want to give them the answer. You just want to prompt them and walk away. And hopefully you've done enough teaching. So with that prompt, the kids can do it.
Yeah.
Again, and one of the pitfalls in teaching is you don't want to stand over the kids as they fix their errors. You want to be able to prompt them and then move away so they get the idea of working independently. Ziggy did a really, really good job in writing the teacher's guide. So they're just the guide is filled with practical suggestions about how to keep lessons moving, how to keep
Yeah.
lessons positive, what to do when kids need more practice on language, and
Right.
talks also the difference between working with kids who come into your room with high language skills and may have some mechanical problems versus kids who really don't have much language, whose parents haven't had the opportunity or the ability to teach them much as far as uh, receptive and expressive language skills. So
Yeah.
you have to know how to separate that and provide the help without embarrassing kids and
Absolutely.
yes. The, we incorporated a point system into the second level, and
Hmm.
kids can get points, and the point system goes along with the checks, and
Hmm.
and we put the most emphasis on actually writing passages. They get the big points by writing passages, and the teachers had to set up a reward system. I remember when I was a teacher, when I taught expressive, I'd always pick out one thing, anything that was driving me crazy, I, I would make a special reward. And I say, okay, now I'm going to check your papers for spelling today. Anybody who doesn't make any spelling mistakes on words in the vocabulary box is going to get extra recess. Okay, so I you know, so I'd look at their papers over,
Yeah.
say, oh, be careful there, look at that
Yeah.
spelling.
Yeah.
And and that would work. I'd
Yeah.
focus rather than complain about it, which I was easy to do. I think,
Exactly.
okay, how do I need to reteach and reward this behavior? And it was amazing how that worked. Expressive writing as a teacher, it's a great program to use in that you see it teaches you how to teach component skills, as you go through it.
Mhm.
Wow. And it teaches you it helps you identify, prerequisites, things and like teaching the range of sentences and to show how, if you go step by step, how that turns into success.
Yeah. Yeah. Jerry, as you reflect on the legacy of expressive writing, what do you hope educators continue to understand and apply?
The latest revision of reading mastery, called Reading Mastery Transformations,
Hmm.
has a reading component and a language component. the skills taught in expressive writing now are included in the second grade and the third grade levels of the transformation language program. And what we're seeing is how successful the kids can be. Kids come in, they learn how to read in kindergarten and in first grade. Now here you are, you're in Chicago, you're in Los Angeles, you got tough, poor kids, and we teach them how to read in kindergarten and in first grade. Then in second grade, we teach them how to write and how to and how to write and express themselves.
Yeah.
It's so nice seeing those pieces come together and knowing it can happen in the lower grades. You know, I visited some high schools where they're using where they're using expressive writing. And the good part is the kids, do well, for the most part.
Yeah.
But isn't it sad that they could have been taught in second and third grade? They could have come, they could be taught earlier. So the one thing I hope happens is we have more of the teaching in the lower grades, and we start as soon as we can to get the kids, set up to be successful in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say to new teachers just being introduced to the program? So maybe this summer they're starting
Okay,
to
study
prepare.
and smile, study and smile. Go over the lessons ahead of time. First, read the teacher's guide again and again and again. Then,
Yeah.
talk with okay, then go over lessons before you present them and think about the different kind of errors kids will make. And you'll find out about the errors because over a period of time, you'll see the actual errors kids are making and think about how you're going to correct them. Be really prepared about how you're going to teach the lesson. Don't let things happen to you. You make it happen.
Yeah.
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 And it can be a great learning experience. The first, can be a great learning experience.
Yeah. Well, Jerry, thank you so much for joining me today. It was wonderful as a DI enthusiast to hear firsthand from you the history and your perspective on it. So on behalf of NIFDI and all of the students and educators that have been impacted by expressive writing, just thank you so much. And congratulations on this 40 years of publication. Here's to the next 40 years of
Yes,
purposeful writing instruction.
right. Go out, go for it. These kids really need you.